So we've spent quite a bit of time discussing what might come after capitalism. Things like resource-based economies, maybe digital currencies, universal basic income.
Mm. UBI comes up a lot.
It does. But nearly all those discussions, they seem to share this one big, often unspoken assumption
Which is,
that the powerful, the elite, whoever controls things will actually choose to support the rest of us, the general population.
Right. That support is baked into the model.
Exactly. So today we want to look beyond the usual UBI talks, beyond social credit systems, and really face what our source material calls the truly uncomfortable endgame.
We're projecting forward here,
Yeah.
thinking, say, 2055 or even later.
Yeah, this is future stuff, and we need to lay out the scenario clearly, I think. The idea is that the three big waves of automation are basically done.
Right. So first, knowledge work coding, law, analysis, that sort of thing. Then physical labor trucking, construction, manufacturing. All automated.
And finally, even creative work art, music composition, design largely handled by AI and robotics.
Meaning, human labor, pretty much across the board, has zero economic value. None. The elite, a small group, control all production through AGI and advanced robots.
So we're economically obsolete in this picture, and that brings us to the really core, frankly terrifying question that jumps out from the sources.
Okay.
If the elite control absolutely everything, and they don't need our labor anymore, and they don't even really need mass consumption to keep their own systems running, why? Why would supporting 8 billion people be anything more than just optional, an expense they could cut?
It stops being an economic necessity for them completely. It becomes purely a choice,
Right.
a matter of preference, maybe.
And that's what we're diving into today. We need to unpack the potential consequences of that choice. We'll look at historical patterns, what happened before.
Yeah, the precedent's important. Then there's the current debate among the power players themselves. They're not all on the same page.
Definitely not. And then we'll look at the possibilities, the futures. This could lead to both the dark ones and hopefully some lighter ones too.
Okay. But before we jump into that deep future stuff, maybe we should quickly clear away some of the, let's call it noise, that often dominates the current policy discussions, like UBI.
Yeah, let's tackle UBI first, because the sources here argue it's largely theater in the long run.
Theater. How so?
The argument is that the money flow is essentially circular. Think about it. Corporations pay some tax, the government hands out UBI using that tax money.
And then people use that UBI to buy goods and services from those same corporations.
Exactly, who then pay tax on those profits. The state just becomes the sort of highly visible middleman recycling corporate revenue back to itself.
So it doesn't fundamentally change the power structure.
Not according to this view, no. But okay, let's say we move beyond money altogether. Imagine a pure resource allocation system. A central AI decides who gets food, energy, housing units.
Right, allocation based on need. But then you hit that even bigger problem. Who defines need? Who decides what's a need versus just a want?
And the people programming that AI, designing those algorithms, the sources call their power godlike. They set the rules.
And if you're one of the billions deemed economically obsolete, what's your leverage? You have zero negotiating power to argue about their definition of enough.
Yeah.
You're just completely dependent.
Totally dependent. And that word dependence is crucial. Lots of people think, oh, automation means abundance. Infinite smartphones, unlimited food.
Material abundance, yeah.
Solves everything, right?
Well, no. The sources argue material abundance doesn't actually eliminate scarcity. It just shifts it. The competition moves elsewhere.
Okay. Scarcity remains for things you can't just manufacture more of. Like you can't 3D print prime real estate in Manhattan, can you?
Exactly. Or beachfront property.
Yeah.
Or just sheer physical space. Or human attention, status, real political power. Those things remain finite.
So once everyone's basic material needs are theoretically met by the machines, the fight intensifies for those scarce, non-manufacturable goods, like land and influence. Precisely. It becomes this intense, maybe even zero-sum game for control over those limited resources and political power itself.
Okay, that makes sense. It shifts the battlefield.
Right. So now let's look back. Let's turn to history, because it has some pretty stark lessons about what happens when technology makes one group, less valuable to another. The pattern is often, frankly, abandonment.
Yeah, one of the clearest examples they bring up is the British handloom weavers, early 1800s.
What happened there?
Well, initially, things looked great for them. Mechanized spinning actually created more yarn, boosting demand for weavers. Their wages shot up like over 90% between 1793 and 1817. They were skilled artisans, highly valued.
They must have felt pretty secure. High skills, high demand.
Absolutely. And then, bam, the fully automated power loom arrives.
Ah, technology leapfrogs them.
Completely.
Huh.
And their wages just collapsed. We're talking a 75% drop in real wages in about 20 years, from 1806 to 1830.
75%, that's devastating. What happened to the weavers?
Over 200,000 skilled workers were just displaced instantly. No retraining programs, no safety net, nothing. They were obsolete.
And their response?
Desperation led to protests, big ones,
Yeah.
like the Peterloo Massacre in Manchester, 1819. Peaceful protesters demanding reform, and the local cavalry charged them.
Charge their own citizens.
Yep. Killed 18, injured hundreds more, all because these workers were demanding political representation and relief after being displaced by machines.
That's incredible. So the source implies the modern equivalent might be, what, deploying automated security forces against people protesting job losses to AGI?
It certainly suggests that the historical default response to large, displaced, economically non-essential populations hasn't been support. It's often been suppression and ultimately abandonment.
Are there other examples?
Oh, definitely. Look at the enclosure movements in Britain, mostly 1760 to 1832. Parliament passed over 5,000 acts privatizing common lands that peasants had used for generations.
Kick them off the land they lived on.
Pretty much. Dispossessed, with no compensation. It fueled massive poverty for generations, forcing people into dangerous city slums or overseas migration.
So what's the big takeaway from history here?
Well, two prominent economists, Esmoglu and Johnson, studied centuries of these technological shifts. Their conclusion is chilling. They found zero examples, not one,
Zero examples of what?
of powerful groups proactively stepping in to protect the welfare of displaced workers at the time they're being displaced. It just didn't happen.
Wow. So any improvements only came later, through struggle.
Exactly. Improvements came through sustained political fights, like the rise of unions and democratic reforms, or when economic growth eventually created new kinds of labor demand, making the masses valuable again. The powerful had to be forced to care, or they had to need the powerless for something new.
And that right there is the terrifying difference for 2055, isn't it? In all those past examples, the weavers, the peasants, the elite, the factory owners, the landowners, they still needed the masses for something eventually.
Right. To run the new machines, to buy the cheap goods, to fight in armies, whatever. There was still some mutual dependence, even if it was exploitative.
But by 2055, with full AGI and robotics, that mutual dependence could be completely gone. The elite might literally need nothing from the rest of humanity.
Which, based on history, puts humanity in an unprecedentedly vulnerable position.
Okay, so if history paints a picture of abandonment when dependence disappears, where do today's global elites actually stand on this? Are they thinking about it? It seems they're quite divided.
Very divided. You have some starkly different visions emerging. On one end, you've got someone like the historian Yuval Noah Harari. He's talked quite a bit about the potential rise of the useless class.
The useless class, that sounds harsh.
It is. He describes it as people who are just devoid of any economic, political, or even artistic value in this future automated system. He speculates they might spend most of their time in, like, immersive 3D virtual reality worlds.
Kept occupied how?
Maybe, he suggests, engaged by sophisticated drugs and games, basically managed distraction. And his prediction kind of aligns with those source estimates of 85–90% job elimination once AGI really takes hold.
Wow. Okay, that's one end. What's the other extreme?
The polar opposite might be someone like Mark Andreessen, the venture capitalist. He completely rejects the automation fear, calls it the lump of labor fallacy.
Right, the idea that there's only a finite amount of work.
Exactly. He says that's wrong. He predicts AI will trigger the most dramatic and sustained economic boom of all time. He's actually against UBI.
Against it? Why?
He argues UBI turns people into zoo animals. He wants AI to, in his words, crash human wages to zero to maximize productivity and unleash this boom.
Yeah.
A very different vision.
Crash wages to zero.
Hmm.
Okay, so Harari sees managed obsolescence, and Andreessen sees a wage-crashing boom. Is there a middle ground?
There is. People like Elon Musk have consistently said UBI will eventually become necessary. His logic is simple. No job is needed, so we'll need a universal high income instead of basic income.
Universal high income, interesting distinction.
And remember, Bill Gates, back in 2017, he proposed a robot tax. The idea was to tax the output of robots to fund roles that require human empathy, like elder care, education support, things AI might not do well.
So Musk and Gates at least acknowledge the potential for mass displacement and suggest mechanisms for redistribution, right?
They do. But, and this is a big but from the sources, you have to be careful about public statements versus private actions.
Meaning?
Well, look at Jeff Bezos. Publicly, he's talked about AI leading to new callings and careers, very optimistic.
Okay.
But then, leaked internal Amazon documents surfaced. They revealed concrete plans to automate almost half their U.S. warehouse workforce. That's around 500,000 jobs targeted for automation.
500,000 jobs, while publicly saying AI creates new callings.
Exactly. So the takeaway is the elite are definitely divided in their thinking, or at least in what they say publicly. But their internal planning might paint a much colder, more pragmatic picture.
Which leads us back to those cold calculations. If you're part of that small elite controlling everything in 2055, and you've got 8 billion people who offer no economic value but represent a huge potential source of instability, the sources called this the liability problem. How do you manage that liability?
Yeah, why take on that massive risk? And the sources outline a few deeply unsettling but rational paths from that perspective.
Okay, what's the first?
One is the natural decline path. This one requires, well, almost no active cruelty. You just maintain the economic pressures we already see globally.
Like what?
High housing costs, unaffordable childcare, expensive education. Keep those pressures high enough that birth rates stay below the replacement level of 2.1 children per woman, which, by the way, is already the reality in most developed nations and many developing ones, too.
So you just let demographics do the work.
Pretty much. If you sustain that economic pressure for, say, 3 generations, 8 billion people could plausibly shrink to 2 billion. No mass killings, no overt political decisions needed. The sources say the economics work themselves out. The liability reduces naturally.
That's passively grim. What's a more active but maybe deniable scenario?
Yeah, that's where you get the automation of atrocity scenario. This one is genuinely chilling.
How does that work?
Imagine all critical infrastructure, food distribution, water purification, power grids is run by sophisticated autonomous AI systems optimizing for efficiency, resilience, maybe resource conservation.
Okay, it sounds efficient.
But what happens if these systems encounter unexpected events? Or resource shortages, or just make cold, calculated optimization decisions based on program metrics. Maybe they deprioritize maintenance or resource allocation to certain regions deemed less critical or too costly to support.
And the result could be?
Mass casualties,
Yeah.
power grids failing in a harsh winter, water systems being contaminated, food deliveries disrupted, catastrophes occur.
But who's to blame?
Exactly. Accountability becomes impossible. Was it a genuine software glitch, a hardware failure, an unexpected consequence of complex optimization? You can always say the AI made an error or it was a technical malfunction. No one is directly responsible, no smoking gun, atrocity achieved through automated indifference.
That's terrifying because it sounds plausible. Okay, there's another factor the sources bring up. Immortality.
Right, the immortality math. This adds another layer. Let's assume by 2055, the elite have access to significant life extension technologies. Maybe not true immortality, but living healthily for 200 years, maybe more.
Okay, so they live much longer. How does that change the calculation?
Compound interest. Think about wealth. If you have vast wealth and can get a steady, say, 7% return for 200 years instead of 50,
Yeah.
the difference is astronomical.
How big?
A 7% return over 200 years makes your initial wealth multiply by nearly 750,000 times. It creates dynasties of unimaginable permanent wealth concentration.
So these effectively immortal, hyper-wealthy elites.
What incentives do they have to maintain billions of short-lived, ordinary biological humans? The sources use the term mayflies. We'd just be consuming resources, potentially causing instability, and offering zero economic return to them.
It creates a permanent biological caste system almost, the long-lived versus the short-lived.
Precisely. The short-lived, economically useless masses become, from their perspective, a drag on the resources needed for their own extended lifespans and grand projects.
Okay, but what if they don't go for population reduction? What if they choose to keep the 8 billion?
Then the most rational path, again from that cold elite perspective, is likely the surveillance and control endgame.
Which looks like?
Total surveillance. Think social credit systems on steroids, linked to central bank digital currencies that can be instantly controlled or restricted. Combine that with ubiquitous robot enforcement for perfect compliance.
So the masses are kept alive, maybe even materially comfortable to a degree.
But utterly powerless. Monitored, managed, controlled. Sources describe this rather bluntly as livestock management. A comfortable cage, perhaps, but a cage nonetheless.
Okay, wow. That is a lot of darkness to take in. Natural decline, automated atrocities, immortal castes, total surveillance. Are we sure this isn't just dystopian fear-mongering based on cherry-picked history? Does the tech itself offer any better path?
Yes. Absolutely. We have to flip the script here, because that dark vision, while plausible based on history and rational calculation, is not inevitable. It's crucial to state that.
So there is a positive potential.
Definitely. The technological capacity for genuine shared abundance. It actually exists or is clearly emerging. Research consistently shows Earth can comfortably support 6, 8, even 10 billion people with full automation, renewable energy like fusion, advanced agriculture.
So it's not fundamentally a resource problem. We can make enough for everyone.
Yes, it boils down to a choice problem, an allocation problem, a political problem, not a fundamental lack of resources or technological capability.
And that brings in the moral dimension, doesn't it?
Hugely. For the first time ever, humanity has the real practical capacity to eliminate abject poverty, preventable disease, needless suffering on a global scale.
And surely there's an obligation there.
Well, pretty much every major ethical framework you can think of, utilitarianism, greatest good for the greatest number, Kantian ethics, treating people as ends, not means, social contract theory, mutual obligations, they all strongly suggest that moral obligations do exist regardless of someone's economic value.
You don't just discard people because they're no longer profitable for your system.
Exactly. There's a powerful moral imperative to choose abundance and support.
What does that abundance actually look like, though, on a personal level?
Think about it from, say, a parent's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to genuinely tell your child, you never ever have to worry about basic survival. You are safe. Food, shelter, healthcare, forever, guaranteed.
That removes a fundamental anxiety that shapes most human lives.
It completely changes the game. When failure trying something new, pursuing a passion loses its catastrophic consequence of potential destitution, it unlocks incredible human potential. Exploration, creativity, self-discovery can flourish without that constant, crushing survival pressure.
And the material side.
The end of preventable suffering. No child starves. No one dies from incurable illness because they can't afford treatment. Materially, it could be paradise nanobots repairing things, clean fusion energy, personalized medicine, 3D printing anything you need.
And creativity.
Democratized. If the means of production and creation are essentially free and accessible, then talent, imagination, and effort become the primary drivers, not access to capital or wealth. It's arguably the highest possible outcome for humanity.
Yeah.
Shared prosperity, unlocked potential.
Okay, so we have these two starkly opposing futures. Managed decline or control on one side, shared abundance on the other. Where are we now? Which way is it leaning?
And this is the crucial point. The outcome is genuinely, truly uncertain right now. It's not predetermined. It's being decided by the choices we make collectively during this transition period, right now. 2025 to maybe 2055.
We're in it now.
We are absolutely in the first phase. The displacement of knowledge workers by AI is happening as we speak. This isn't sci-fi anymore.
So this period, the next couple of decades, is critical because leverage.
Exactly. That's the critical variable you, the listener, need to grasp. Political action, organizing, public pressure, it all still matters now. Why? Because the masses still have some leverage.
Through voting, protesting, striking, consumer boycotts.
Yes. But once full automation hits, let's say post-2045 or 2050, and the elite truly need nothing from the general population, all that traditional leverage potentially evaporates. Who are you going to strike against if they don't need your labor? How do you boycott if they don't need your consumption?
And your power diminishes drastically when mutual dependence ends.
Precisely. So this window, right now, is the time to act, while leverage still exists.
So what can individuals actually do during this shrinking window?
Well, several things. First, build personal leverage now. Focus on skills that complement AI, human-AI collaboration, critical thinking, creativity, and crucially, focus on deeply human roles. Community building, empathy-driven work, caregiving, things AI might not replicate well.
Okay, skills, that else.
Build resilience.
Bro.
Don't assume centralized systems will always be there for you, especially during turbulence. Financial resilience is key, but also social capital strong community ties, mutual aid networks, people helping people when the big systems falter.
Makes sense. And collectively.
Collective action is probably the most critical piece. Demand transparency and accountability from the tech companies developing these powerful AIs. Support policies that proactively protect and retrain displaced workers. Don't wait until it's a crisis.
And pressure politicians.
Absolutely. Pressure politicians to understand these long-term risks and legislate guardrails before we pass the point of no return, before the leverage is lost.
Yeah, so wrapping this up, we basically face three potential endgames, right?
That seems to be the spectrum presented. First, humanity achieves its greatest triumph. Shared post-scarcity, Universal flourishing. The optimistic view.
Second.
We repeat history's depressing pattern. The economically obsolete are abandoned, perhaps violently, perhaps passively, through neglect and managed decline.
And the third.
We settle for the middle ground of managed, powerless control. The surveillance state endgame, where the masses are kept alive but docile like well-managed livestock.
So the ultimate uncomfortable question really isn't about what specific system, like UBI or resource allocation, replaces capitalism.
No, the deeper question is how we ensure that supporting the entirety of humanity is seen as the rational, moral, and politically necessary choice by those who will hold unprecedented power.
And how we make sure that choice is locked in while we still have the power to influence it.
Precisely. Because the historical pattern is crystal clear. Elite abandonment tends to follow the loss of mutual dependence. If the only reliable way to counteract that historical tendency is through proactive political struggle now, before we become truly useless in their eyes.
Then what is the real cost of simply staying passive, of waiting to see what happens during this incredibly consequential but likely quite narrow transition window?
That's the thought to really grapple with.
Indeed. Something to think about until our next deep dive.